Hello and welcome to the Rising Generation Leadership Podcast with me, Errol, Lawson. If this is your first time joining us, we want to welcome you. It's great to have you with us today. The Rising Generation exists to inspire and equip Christian leaders from all walks of life, from all around the world, to fulfill their God-given potential. By hearing these interviews with established, internationally recognized leaders, we hope you'll be inspired to connect the dots between where you are now and where it is God has called you to be. Now, to receive notifications about future episodes, simply subscribe to our podcast show by either on iTunes if you're on Apple, or on Stitcher, the Stitcher app if you're on Android. You can find out how to do that just by going to our webpage at www.errollawson.com/podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please share it with your friends, share it with your loved ones. Hopefully they will also benefit from the content. Guys, thanks for listening. Before we go into today's show, here's some news for you.
At some point in their lives, every great leader runs up against one problem that is simply impossible to ignore. How are they going to fund their vision? Today, Errol is offering you a free copy of his first book in the Rising Generation Leadership Series entitled Big Vision, No Money: 5 Keys to Funding Your Vision. In the book, you'll find guidance from some of the great leaders featured on this podcast about the way Christian leaders should think about money and approach their finances. Simply go to www.errollawson.com to download your copy today.
Hello and welcome again to the Rising Generation Leadership Podcast with me, Errol Lawson. Broadcasting all the way from Birmingham in the UK to wherever it is you are in the world today. And my special guest today is Jonathan Milligan. Jonathan Milligan is an author, a blogger, a speaker, and a career coach. He spent the last decade counseling, guiding, and directing career professionals on how to pursue meaningful work. Since 2009, Jonathan has been building a portable lifestyle business through blogging. And today he teaches others the roadmap to doing the same. His 2 primary blogs are jonathanmilligan.com and bloggingyourpassion.com. He's also active in his local church, serving as a deacon and leader of the hospitality ministry. He resides in Jacksonville, Florida with his wife and 2 kids. Jonathan, thank you for your time today, sir. It's great to have you with us.
Hey, Errol, thanks for having me.
Awesome. So, Jonathan, first of all, please fill in any gaps there in your bio for us and give us a glimpse into what you're up to in the world today.
Sure thing. Well, I grew up in a ministry home. My dad was a youth pastor, high school basketball coach, and even a high school teacher. My mom was an elementary teacher in a private Christian school. And so that was my childhood. And so growing up, I knew what it was like to be a pastor's kid, and both of them were educators as well. And so, first of all, I could never get away with anything because they were always around. Whether I was at school or when we weren't in school, they were off of, during the summers they were off. And so I grew up in a great Christian home. And I began wrestling with, when I got to my college age years, what was I going to do with my life? Was God calling me into the ministry? Did he have something else in mind? I don't know. And we can certainly get into some of that. But I ended up going into being a high school teacher and a basketball coach. Started there for about 3 years. But there was just something in me where I felt like God was spurring me to go in a different direction. And even my wife, we have conversations at that time, and she would tell me, Jonathan, I see that it's not just going to be your traditional pathway that God's got you on, but you're going to be open to a journey with him and see where he takes you, whether that's in ministry, out of ministry, or in and out of ministry in your life. You just need to know where God wants you to go right now. And that kind of gave me permission to start pursuing things that were more entrepreneurial. So I went from a high school teacher to not knowing what I was going to do. Long story short, today I've worked from home and I manage 2 blog properties, and I get to teach people online and help them to pursue the things that God has in their heart and help them get their voices heard. And that's what I love.
Awesome. That's a powerful story. And I think, I know we were just sharing a little bit before the interview about the fact that for a lot of people, there's a message that they've received in church that the number one job in the body of Christ is the full-time pastor. And if you're not doing that, then you've set up for something inferior. You're just a teacher, you're just a doctor, you're just a business person. And now your job is to provide for the serious Christians who are now in ministry, kind of thing. And I think a lot of people struggle with that, and as such, maybe don't think about sharing their own stories or starting their own initiative or enterprise and being impactful in society with that. And so I'm keen to know, you just take us into that process for a moment, and where you were in that transition period. Like, what was going on for you emotionally, mentally? I know you said your wife was kind of encouraging you, and you were kind of waiting on God. What was going on for you in that?
So when I was in especially the college years, and even a little bit after the college years, I was wrestling with this idea of calling. What was I called to do? What was that thing that I was supposed to be doing? And I didn't know. I struggled with it. And, I'd see a lot of my friends who would give their life to a lifetime of ministry, and they were so confident in their calling, and I was happy for them, but I didn't have my Damascus Road experience. I didn't have that this was what I was born to do from an early age feeling when I was in college. And I remember my mom provided one really interesting concept. Said, "Mom, I don't know if I should be in ministry, if I should be a pastor. I want my life to count, and I don't want my life to be wasted. But do I have to make a decision towards being in full-time ministry and feeling like that was the only thing I could do to not feel like my life was wasted? Or do I have permission to explore other things?" And I remember she told me, she goes, "Jonathan, if everyone was called to be a pastor, there would not be a congregation." And although that sounds so practical, it was it was like the thing I needed in the moment to say, you know what? Just because you get your paycheck from a particular place, and doesn't mean that has to come from a church congregation aspect to make it to where your life isn't about ministry. And God began to reveal examples of that. I remember when I met my father-in-law, he was an entrepreneur. He was really into real estate and out there talking with people. And it was like every day was ministry for him, because every conversation he would get to know the person and find out what was going on in their life. And he just had such a natural way to do it. And there were just so many examples of that in growing up that I began to realize that, you know what, calling is, and this is what I believe God's taught me, that calling is more like a personally tailored vision for your life, and that it's not always necessarily to a place, a country, a church, a job title, or a ministry. And calling isn't what you do for God, but it's a personal daily decision to do life with God. And I knew that I could be in step with my calling if I chose every day to walk in step with Him and make that decision daily. And when I realized that, and when my wife told me, like I mentioned earlier, she said, "Jonathan," she goes, "I see you weaving in and out of ministry in your life as God brings opportunities for you." You said, "You don't have to go the traditional path." And in my mind, I had this idea that my path had to be, become a youth pastor, and then somehow you outgrow being a youth pastor and you become an assistant pastor, and then you become a full-time pastor, and that is the only pathway to being fully used by God. And we just live in a unique time where now we have the opportunity to get outside the church walls. And I see this happening all around me, Errol, where we have so many people that God is raising up in different spaces outside of the ministry opportunities in this online entrepreneurial space. And they are impacting people with the message of the gospel in unique and exciting ways. And for that is what I'm excited about. And that's been a journey for me, but that in a nutshell is what God's taught me along the way.
And was there a time in your journey where maybe you're going in one direction and something happened that caused you to go into a different direction? When a time when everything just seemed to click.
There was a part in my journey where I actually, what I did was I reached out to 5 people who knew me best, and I asked them 2 questions. The first question was, can you give me 3 words that best describe me? And the second question I asked them is, when have you seen me come the most fully alive? And what I was looking for in that little exercise was, how had God created me? What were the things? They often say that it's hard to read the label when you're inside the bottle. And for so many of us, it's hard for us to see how God's gifted us because we're in our own skin. We don't see it. We don't see the gifts that we have. And we need other people to give us insight into what those gifts might be. And when the answer that I got back was revolutionary, to giving me permission to just be who God had created me to be. And the number one thing they told me was, Jonathan, you are resourceful. You're the type of person who, when a problem's presented, you say, hey, have you thought about, and then you fill in the blank, whatever that is. Lean into your resourcefulness. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to do that. And that's when I began to unleash, in more blog posts and podcasts and webinars and training. And it was like the more that I shared and the more that I was willing to put out there to help more and more people, God gave me more. I didn't run out. And when you find out what that thing is that God has gifted you in, it's actually part of a book that I'm in the middle of writing. It's called The Gift, What You Have That the Richest Man Can't Buy. And I just believe deeply that every single one of us, we've been created by God. We're not a mistake, and that He has given each and every one of us a unique gift that we can use in the world. And when we lean into that and we allow that to happen, I believe that God makes room for us. It says in Proverbs that a man's gift makes room for him and brings him before great men. And I believe that happens when we lean into our gifts.
That's good, Jonathan. And what's been your biggest challenge in leadership so far? Tell us that story.
Honestly, one of my biggest challenges has been myself. It has been allowing myself to have permission to step into what I believe God, because it's so easy for us, Errol, to look at other people and say, wow, I could never be, or I look at somebody and I'm like, wow, I wish I could be like them. And so we start trying to emulate them. And then, man, I wish I was more charismatic, and I wish I wasn't so laid back, and I wish I was this. And we begin to discount, again, what God has given us. And so the real challenge for me was giving myself permission to just be who God made me to be. And when you do that, that is when I believe, again, opportunities come your way. But I also believe that when you begin to have the permission to be who you are, then you become more authentic, and your message gets out there in a big way.
I'm just wondering, so how did you come through that process? Just believing in yourself. In that, I had a chat with my friend recently. A friend of mine is also a coach, and he's encouraging me, saying, Arrowhead, there's enough in you, and just believe in who you are, what you're carrying, and just helping me to change my perspective a little bit around some areas of my growth. But what was your process? How did you come through that?
Yeah, so that is one that I did struggle with. And I think what helped me was understanding the concept of being a leading learner. And the idea behind a leading learner is that, first of all, that you have a desire to constantly be growing and constantly be learning yourself and constantly looking for ways that God is teaching you. And so, there's 3 fundamental things that I often will teach others: is always be growing, always be thinking. We don't spend enough time getting away and thinking. And with that is time of prayer and thinking about what's going on in our world. And then always be renewing, unplugging in a big way. And so for me, the leading learner is that there are people coming behind you who have yet to understand or experience or know what you know. And I always use the example in the online business space of if you consistently were making $1,000 a month, while that's not enough to quit your day job over, somebody else who wanted and desired the same thing would so love to learn from you because they're at a place where they're making no money online in that space, right? They want to know the things that you did. What are the things that you learned? Give me some examples, that sort of thing. And so the thing that I go back to always helped me was the concept of being a leading learner.
Are you seriously fired up about growing as a leader in business or church-based ministry? Are you feeling somewhat frustrated about not having realized your full potential in what you've been called to do? Could you do with someone to help you get some extra clarity or to be a sounding board for your plans and ideas? Great athletes have coaches, so do great leaders. The right leadership coach for you will result in an increased sense of clarity, direction, and purpose, dramatically increasing the results you achieve. If you're ready to step up, contact Errol to book a free, no-obligation, introductory coaching session and see whether Errol is the right coach for you. Errol takes the lessons learned from his own leadership journey and from his extensive research to help leaders and entrepreneurs to step into their biggest challenges and rise to their next level. Email admin@errollawson.com right now to schedule your call.
So how do you now define success at this stage in your journey?
Yeah, success for me would be, I think it's, first of all, like I mentioned before, it's the daily decision to walk with God daily. That is success. But I think it's also learning to bloom where you're planted in the moment. Oftentimes it's so easy for us to look at, well, I wish I was there. And, the wish I was there never ends. Once we get to another level of financial success or the number of people that we're impacting, we still look at other people who have bigger businesses, bigger impact. Yeah. And so it's like that comparison trap will destroy you. And comparison is the thief of joy. And you have to get to a place where you decide that I'm not going to compare, but success for me is doing life daily with God and blooming where I'm planted in the moment and giving 100% at what I'm given in the moment.
So have there been any other key habits that have contributed towards your success?
Yeah, so I have in my space, in the online entrepreneurial space, I have what I call the 4 keystone habits. And they are create, capture, compile, and connect. And here's what each of those mean briefly. Create is as information sharers in this space, information marketing or running an online business, we should constantly be creating helpful content, either through text, audio, or video, that we can get out there to the masses and be helpful to them. This is free content. So I'm always looking at what else can I do to serve the audience that God has brought my way. The capture habit is building an email list. The more people that go on my email list, the more opportunity I have to influence them, help them. And then the compile habit is where I package products and services. This is the income side that helps my business to run. And so whether that is a coaching program or an online course or speaking or a book I'm writing, I'm always looking at the next thing that I can compile, I can bring together through my experience and sell. And then the connect habit, which is largely what we're doing right now, and that is to connect with other like-minded people and promote them and to share them and what they're doing, because God's up to something way bigger than just what I've got going on in my world. And so those are the kind of the habits that drive me. Is every week I'm looking at create, the capture, compile, and connect habits. And that's what 90 to 95% of my work week looks like.
And that's great, Jonathan. And as a leader, what's your biggest weakness?
My biggest weakness is thinking that I have to do it all or that only I can do it all. And that that's been the struggle for me. And I've gotten better over the years at getting other people to help me or being a part of something bigger than what I'm doing by myself. And, um, it reminds me of a quote I heard from Michael Hyatt when I attended a conference. And he said, if your dream doesn't require a team, then your dream's not big enough. And that challenged me in a big way because I had been doing so much of it myself. And I needed to realize that that a bottleneck is skinny at the top for a reason. And that's because I'm the bottleneck and I need to get out of my own way sometimes to allow my vision to expand of what God wants to do through me and through my business.
Awesome. Thank you for being so open. And what's your biggest strength?
Strength would be the learning aspect, the ability to constantly be learning. I read a couple books a week, and being able to take the different things that I love to learn and break it down and compile it and put it into a practical sense for other people so that they can glean off of the hours that I like to spend learning and reading, and I can turn around and give it to them in a nugget size type format.
Nice. Thank you. And I think it was John Maxwell that said that the secrets of success are hidden in your daily routine. Typically speaking, what do the first 90 minutes of your day look like?
Yeah, that's so important for me. So I have this thing that I say over and over, this statement I say over and over again, and that is do creative work first, reactive work second. It's so easy for us to jump into reactive work. Reactive work is I check email. If I check email in the beginning of the day, I look at, I'm answering phone calls, returning phone calls, and I get pulled into a lot of other things. Creative work for me means I carve out, for me, the first 90 minutes of my day to work on the creative side of my business, which would be creating the next blog post, the podcast, the course that I want to deliver. And so carving out that time first, and whatever it is for you, you may not be in this kind of space that I'm in, but carving out that first 90 minutes to do what's most important to you first, then check the email, the social media, the everything else will help you to move things forward if you're feeling stuck right now.
Mm, mm. And have you always had that kind of routine in the morning? Growing up as a family, was it normal to have that kind of structure?
No, it wasn't. And it actually came out of a frustration that I had from moving my blogging business forward. At the time, when I first started my blog, I was an executive recruiter. I had jumped into a startup executive search business. It was just my partner and I. But on the side, I really wanted to start blogging because I felt like this writing gift was in me and I needed that creative outlet. But I wasn't finding time for it. I was a busy family man. My kids were young and they were into sports. And so that was what we were doing in the evenings. It was just hard to find space for it. It wasn't until I decided to work for myself first between the hours of 5 to 7 a.m. every morning that I started seeing traction in my side hustle, my side business. And I wasn't a morning person when I started this, but I tell you one thing, when you wake up that early, you're not looking at what's going on Facebook or anything else. You're figuring out what it is that I need to do to move my business forward. And so I carved out 10 hours a week in those 2 hours a day, Monday through Friday, to help me get some momentum in the direction I wanted to go.
Guys, I hope you're listening to this. This is when we're here, every leader, and we're bringing to you guys leaders from around the world who are making a mark. They're making a difference internationally with their work. You hear time and time again, there's intentionality about making the most of our time, especially at the beginning of our day. Just a great example there. 10 hours. If you're working now, you've got a full-time job, or you're saying, I've got all the kids running around, I haven't got the time. Guys, you can carve out time, put time in to build your dream, build your whatever your side hustle might be. There is enough time to do it. You can do it. Jonathan, at the beginning of your leadership journey, what if anything was holding you back as a leader? What if anything was holding you back from starting out?
So when I first was headed in this direction, you heard me say in the beginning that I taught high school for 3 years. And then I decided not to renew my contract. And I didn't know what I was going to do. My wife and I were married probably less than 5 years. I had one child, and we had another one coming along. And here I am. I don't know what I'm doing. I ended up getting a night call center job at night, and that allowed me to have my days free to figure out what I was going to pursue next. And there was a time where I was studying every possible option, but I was taking no action. And I remember one night after the call center job, I was standing in the parking lot with a coworker, and he knew my entrepreneurial desire that I wanted to do something, but he knew I wasn't taking action. And I finally, that night, I looked at him and said, I'm ready to go fail at something. He's like, what? I said, I'm so frustrated with not taking any action that this feels more painful to me than going out and failing. And that was the moment where I decided that I wasn't going to let failure stop me. In fact, failure was an easier thing to deal with than not starting at all. So to not go after my dreams was painful enough. And it was increasingly more painful that I had to start. And, so I think getting to that place of ready to fail is such an important place for a lot of entrepreneurs, because until you reach that place, you probably are never, ever going to start.
Guys, are you hearing this? I'm ready to go and fail. Somebody hearing this needs to take action right now and just stop procrastinating, stop talking about it. Just do whatever it takes to step out of that comfort zone and go take action. Awesome stuff. Powerful stuff, man. Listen, Jonathan, who have been your top 3 mentors in your leadership journey so far?
Top 3 mentors? A long time mentor for me is Zig Ziglar. Never got a chance to meet him personally. I did hear him speak in person, but he was a mentor, somebody who, in the midst of all the reading and learning I was doing from people who were successful, his definition of success, his approach to success was refreshing. It was a God-driven type of success. And so for that, I've always been grateful for his life and his ministry. John Maxwell has been another person who has influenced me a lot. And then I would say a third one has been Mark Batterson. Reading his books allowed me to feel like I could launch out and I could do things. And all his books speak to that idea of going on an adventure with God. And so I love Mark's books that he's written. So those would be some of the mentors looking back that have probably influenced me the most.
Let's dig a little bit deeper into each of those 3 relationships. What's the single best piece of advice you've received from each of those 3 people?
Wow. So Zig, I've got so many I could share, but I would say with Zig, it was probably he challenged me to understand what it was I was trying to build towards and what success really was. And that success wasn't the size of a house, but it was having a home. And that I needed to define the right type of success, where so many other people that I was following or listening to was a lot different. It was about, it was about the money, the income. And there were people who had the money that were not happy. And so that's what I got from him. From John Maxwell, I attended a writers conference that he had. It was one of the first, when I didn't realize it until I got there. It was a one-day conference. And he said, you know what? After all my years of doing leadership training, I've never done a one-day conference just on writing. He said, you guys are the first. And he gave everybody in attendance that day his very first book. And he said, I gave you this book to encourage you. And there were some people that kind of got his joke, and he's just smiling on stage, and other people trying to think, what does he mean? And what he was trying to say is, if you read my first book, the writing's bad, my chapters are extremely short, but I want to encourage you as a writer that you may look at me and say, wow, John Maxwell just has the golden touch, all his books. And he said, I'm telling you, you have to just get started, and you will get better as you go along. So that's what I learned from him. From Mark Batterson, I think his very first book was an incredible, helpful insight for me. And in fact, when I read the book, I had it on a plane, and my wife grabbed a copy of it, and she's not a reader, and she wouldn't stop reading the book. And that helped me to say, I'm going to go on this journey with God, and I need to have permission to go on this unknown journey with God and chase after what it is that he's up to, and be okay with not knowing where we're going. So those are some of the bigger lessons that I've learned from the three.
And what's the one thing you're most fired up about right now?
That I'm most excited about?
Yeah.
I am most excited about the fact that, and we were talking about this, I think, a little bit earlier, maybe before the interview. But I'm most excited about the fact that I see God raising up Christians in this online entrepreneurial space. And everywhere I turn, I see that God's using these voices to, in turn, influence thousands and millions of other voices. And we are influencing the influencer, right? And that's the powerful thing, is that we have an opportunity to influence people who are in turn going and influencing others. And we're doing it in this online entrepreneurial space between podcasts and webinars, and from writing and speaking and books, and everywhere I look, God is bringing these people up, and he's raising this generation up, I believe. And it's outside of your traditional church walls, where 50 years ago was unheard of, right? This type of influence did not exist unless you stepped foot into a church. And now it's accessible to people in their homes and everywhere. That is an awesome thing that is happening, whether people see it or not. That is happening, and I'm excited to live in the day and age that we live in. And Errol, I heard somebody explain it to me this way the other day. They said, we are the first generation in human history to leave a digital legacy. Meaning that, if I were to die tomorrow, my podcast, my blog content, the videos I've created, the social media post, everything out there is still out there influencing online after we're gone. And you think about Zig Ziglar, we were just talking about him. I know somebody who actually helped resurrect the Zig Ziglar podcast. His name's Kevin Miller. And he told me that they had not published a new podcast in over 16 months after he passed away. And they were still receiving well over 100,000 plus downloads a month. 16 months after he was gone, he has over 100,000 plus people were still being affected by his words and his message. We live in an age where we can leave a digital legacy. It's awesome.
Thanks, Jonathan. We're almost done now, but is there a book or a resource that you'd recommend for an entrepreneur or leader that's listening right now?
Yeah, so one that I have been influenced the most this year is from a book by a guy named Sky Jethani, and it's called With. Reimagining the way you relate to God. It's incredibly profound. There's lots of ways we relate to God. Sometimes we're in the place where we relate to what we can get from God or what we can do for God. It's called With, WITH, Reimagining the Way You Relate to God. His name is Skye, SKYE, Jethani, Jethani. It's an amazing book that has influenced me, my business, in a big way. Another great book is from a friend of mine, Carrie Oberbrunner, called Day Job to Dream Job. I think that is another really profound book for those that are looking to step out and do their own kind of entrepreneurial thing. So those are two books that have influenced me a lot.
Excellent. We'll get those books added into our show notes on the webpage for you. So go check those out, please, guys. Is there a final parting word, Jonathan, you've got for our listeners today? Maybe for a leader, entrepreneur out there. It's a final parting word.
Sure. I think one of the things that we need to know, whether we're an emerging leader or an emerging entrepreneur, is that we're on a journey and we need to have what I call the brick by brick philosophy. And the brick by brick philosophy is every single day you are placing another brick in your influence, your impact, and your income. And it may not be something that you can build overnight, but you need to have the perseverance and the patience to stay with it. Because one day you're going to look back and say, wow, with God's help, I've been able to build an amazing business or been able to have a voice of influence and leadership because I was faithful, that I decided to dig in and allow God to work in my life and choose every day to walk with him and bloom where I was planted. And by doing so, God is partnered with me in being able to build this. And then I just close it by Errol. I wrote this about a week ago, but I call it the Impactpreneur Prayer. It's kind of taking somebody who's an entrepreneur or a leader and kind of adding the word impact. And the prayer says this: as I begin my day, I will choose to work from a place of mission and not fear, service and not greed, humility and not pride. I choose today to offer hope to the discouraged, purpose to the doubting, and direction to the confused. May this be my vision today as I partner with God to build this business. And that is a prayer that I wrote out that I love to pray every day, and that I want to give that prayer to other people to pray and just allow you to lean into what God's up to in your life.
Fantastic. Guys, I really encourage you to go and check out Jonathan's work. Go and check out jonathanmilligan.com. Go and check out bloggingyourpassion.com. Certainly, if you're a coach, you're a speaker, you're an author, and you want to know how to be more effective, to do that better, then you need to speak to Jonathan. He's doing some amazing, amazing work. And whatever stage you're at in your business, go and check out Jonathan's work. I'm sure it can be of help to you. Jonathan, I know you also do an online summit. Can you tell us a bit about the online summit, please?
Yeah, sure. So we did a virtual online summit where I invited lots of great speakers, writers, and coaches to come and share, and it's called the Amplify Summit. You can find it at amplifysummit.co. And then on the back end of that, we do something once or twice a year called the Amplify Workshop, and that's amplifyworkshop.co. And basically, we gather together a small group of emerging writers, speakers, and coaches, and we spend a couple days with them, helping them develop their plan into creating multiple income streams with their message. And so, bloggingyourpassion.com, that's all about online business. JonathanMilligan.com is really about this idea of gifting, calling, productivity, self-development. And so, that's the two places you can find me online.
Awesome. Jonathan, thank you so much for your time today, my friend. It's been wonderful hearing your journey and your story. And I think, guys, we're listening. I think we can hear just that sense of humility and that commitment in everything we do to be walking with God. One thing that stood out for me that Jonathan said was that calling isn't just about a title or an office or a position or a role. Calling is about walking every day with God, just being in communion with God daily as a personal relationship, and out of that flowing a purpose, flowing just the direction that we need, and just the connections that we need, all from that place of daily communion, walking with the Lord. Awesome. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you for today, man. God bless you.
You're welcome.
Thank you again for joining us today on the Rising Generation Leadership Podcast. I pray you've been inspired, you've been lifted, you've been encouraged to take your personal leadership to the next level. We really encourage you guys to just take action, make it happen, do something, start somewhere, go out and change the world in some way, big or small. Guys, if you've enjoyed the podcast today, please share with your friends, share with your loved ones, your colleagues, someone out there you think might benefit from hearing this great content. And if you want some more questions answering, you got a question, email me, Errol@errollawson.com. Or if you want a free 30 to 45 minute coaching session with myself around a leadership challenge or issue you're working on in your business, your church, or in your organization, please feel free to email me right away or get you booked in. It's Errol@errollawson.com. Thank you again for listening. Go to our iTunes page, check it out, check out the previous episodes. Give us a nice review, that would be awesome. Really appreciate if you could do that for us. We really appreciate you just for being here and listening. Thank you so much. God bless you, and we'll see you on the next episode of The Rising Generation.